Okay, Boker Tov. Today's daf is Kuf Yud Aleph, 111, and we will, God willing, begin the last and final parak. That's what we're done today. Okay, we pick up on Kuf Yud Amud Bet, though, and we pick up by the two dots, about 20 lines from the top. Boy Rava, Kohanim. So we're dealing again with a whole case about Gezel Hager and swearing, and the Gemara had a whole question about that the principle that is returned is required to allow for the bringing of the asham. In a normal case, when it wasn't a Gezel Hager, it was a shvua, and you bring an asham, then you need to give the principal back, but the principal doesn't before you can get the kapara, but the principal doesn't have a status, a korban-like status. Here we are seeing that it has a korban-like status, in the sense that it has to be returned during the day. It has to be returned the full amount. It can't, when the Kohanim take it, they can't sort of combine it with other monies and divide it. Each unit that was returned has to be divided equally. So we're giving the money here a whole korban-like status. Okay, so now the Gemara continues.
Do you make a deal with the guy? He's like, listen, I can't do it all. Can I pay it in installments? Is that really not allowed?
Here's the Kohanim. So it's no. I mean, that's the point. It's not just reimbursement. By Rava, so Rava asked, Kohanim begezel hager yorshim havu or mekablim matanas havu. So now we've established that it's like a korban, but now we want to know what somewhat is the Kohanim's sort of monetary rights to it. Now again, to repeat what we said the other day, which is that because it has this korban-like. Because it has this korban-like status, and only a korban-like status, if the guy died, the guy who required the kapara, the Yorshim can keep it. The Kohanim don't have some monetary right to it when it is not necessary as kapara. So if the guy is dead and it's not necessary as kapara, the Kohanim can't claim it. Okay, that was what our Mishnah said. But what if it is necessary as kapara, and the guy's alive and he gives it to the Kohanim? Do they get it as a gift? Or do they get it as if they are the heirs of the ger? They become his appointed heirs. And again, I want to reiterate, that's only when it is doing the function of kapara. They are not his assigned heirs from a monetary perspective, but when it's doing the function of kapara, are they there as receivers of it, like they would receive any korban, or are they there as his appointed heirs? So the Gemara says, L'may nafkamina, what difference does it make? Kigon, here's a nafkamina. Shegazel chametz shavar alav pesach. Stole chametz from the ger that avar alav pesach, and the guy swore about it. Iamarta yorshin have the yorshim hainu di yarsi hainu di yarsi maris. So then what you would give back would be the same thing you would give back to the guy himself. So since the guy himself, you would give back the chametz shavar alav pesach, even though it's worthless, you can give it back to them. Okay. But that's if it's seen as give to them when you are doing it as an act of kapara. Give to them is if they are the ger. Okay, then you would give it to them even though it's worthless. But if it's like some different track that the Torah sets up, not give to them as if they were the ger, but now you must pay the Kohanim what you stole. So if that's true, then havu so it says you should be notating, give something of value. You're not giving them anything. It's just worthless. So it's not seen as give to them as if they are the ger and as if you're giving back to the ger. No, it would be a different track. It would be give to them the value of what you stole. So if that's true, you can't just give them this worthless comment.
Wasn't there a list of what Manos Kahuna are?
Well, we're going to get to that, actually. Good that you mentioned that. So Rav Ze'er asked the following way. He says, no, that's not a nafkamina. Even if you say they're receiving a gift, the question about chametz shavar alav pesach is not our question. That is the gift that the Torah says you give them, meaning the Torah says you give them what you would have given the ger. So if you would have given the ger chametz shavar alav pesach, if that could have counted, because that's what you stole from him, that you can give them. So it's not a question of what you give. You always give what you would have given the ger. The question is in what capacity do they receive it? Okay. So Ella, ki kami bayalan. So what would be the nafkamina? Kigon shenaflulo eser behemas begezel hager. So basically, here's what happened. You, the Kohen, some guy stole, I don't know, like 10,000. You have to steal a lot because it's divided equally by the Kohanim, and you have to have a small mishmar. Okay, but the guy stole 100,000 sheep, and he gave as gezel hager, and gave it back to all the Kohanim, and each one of them got 10 of them. Okay, so if you got 10 sheep as a Yerusha, you have to be mafresh meiser behema. But because then you're like a continuation of the person that you received it from.
Even if you're a priest.
Right. Right, I know that's funny, but you do have to bring it, and you bring it as a corp, whatever. If you buy 10 sheep in the marketplace, if you're given 10 sheep as a gift, then you don't have to give meiser behema. So which is it? Okay, mechayev lafrush minay meiser olo or not? Yoshim havu are the yoshim damamar konu b'tfisas habayis is chayavim, that if an estate buys sheep, acquires sheep.
Wait. Does Master Behema, did the ger already give the Master Behema, presumably?
No. What? I don't understand. No. Well, why?
In other words, if I buy in the marketplace, I don't have to be fish Master Behema.
Right.
So, but these were in the ger's possession. Then someone stole it from me.
Right. So why are we assuming the ger took my Master Behema?
Well, why would we assume he didn't?
I don't know.
Meaning, like, this whole thing could have been like 2 days later, right?
Okay, but it's the case that I don't care. It's the case that he didn't. Why do you have to make it a case that he did?
Which are we saying we know that he did?
Yeah.
Oh.
All right. So anyway, okay. So if somebody inherited sheep, okay, chayavin, you have to be mafresh meiser behema, because the basic point is that the original owner is mafresh meiser behema, and therefore, if you though inherit, you're a continuation of the original owner, and therefore you have to be mafresh meiser behema. Or maybe no, it's like you are just getting a gift. If somebody purchases sheep or gets it as a gift, you're exempt. So when you get this, are you getting this as heirs of the ger and a continuation of the ger's ownership, and you have to be mafresh meiser behema, or are you getting this as some new gift? So what's the halacha? Toshma, come in here. So as Michael anticipated, let's look at the list of what's considered matnas kahuna. 24 gifts of kahuna were given to Aaron and his children, sons. All were given to pral klal, meaning when the Torah introduces them, it says, Rashi quotes it. Okay, this is at the end of a Korach. To all the sanctities of Bnei Israel, I've given them to you for for status, for greatness. Okay, and then it lists all of them, and then it says at the end, the whole Tumas Kadashim. Okay, so it sort of lists them. It says a general statement, it lists them, and it says a general at the end. So these 24 are included in that sort of big general list. Ubrit Melach, and it says at the end that this is like a covenant of salt, meaning an eternal covenant. Kol Mekaimam, anybody who fulfills them, presumably meaning the one who gives them. Kilu Mekaim Klal Padu Klal. It's like you fulfilled all of them. Ubrit Melach, and this eternal covenant. Kol Over Alaim, and if you transgress giving any one of them, Kilu Over Al Klal Padu Klal, it's like you had transgressed it in totality and in particular. Ubrit Melach. The Elohim, these are they. Eser b'mikdash, 10 that apply in the base of Mikdash. For Arba Yerushalayim, 10 in Yerushalayim, that they can only be eaten in Yerushalayim. Eser b'kfulim, and 10 in all places in Israel. Eser b'mikdash, 10 in the Mikdash. Chatas behema, v'chatas ha'of. Okay, so the animals, meaning the sheep and the cows, the chata of an oaf, because they, again, these things, they eat the meat. The Asham Vadai, an Asham that is brought for a definite sin. One of the cases would be what we're talking about. Asham Zelos, there's also Me'ila, there's other Ashamot. Asham Taloi, which is brought for a doubtful sin, a sin that if you knew about it for sure, you'd bring a chatas, we're up to 4. The communal shlamim, you almost never have communal shlamim. You have it by the 2 lambs you bring on Shavuot. They eat the meat, okay, but they only eat the meat. Normally, a shlamim is eaten in all Yerushalayim, but a communal shlamim is kachim and eaten only in the base of Mikdash. That's 5. The log shemen shel mitzora, the log of the oil of a mitzora that's used in his korban that he brings when he finishes his purification process. That's also only eaten in the azara. That's 6. Umoser ha'omer, what's left over from the omer, which is a type of a mincha. So really, it's true about all minchas, but the omer is a communal one. So we're going to v'shtei halechem, v'lechem hapanim. Okay, so we're going to list it separately. So what's left over from the omer mincha? That's 7. V'shtei halechem, they eat the 2 loaves that are brought with on Shavuot. That's 8.
That's considered a mincha also.
Yeah, essentially, yes. V'lechem hapanim, and the bread that is sort of that they eat once a week, that's put on the table. That's 9. V'sharei menachot, and what's left over from any mincha is kachim. That is 10. The Arba Yerushalayim, 4 in Yerushalayim.
So those last 4 could have been 1.
Yeah, if yes, but 10, 4, and 10 is an easy way to remember.
Okay.
Four in Yerushalayim. Habachora, which is Bechor, okay, firstborn of animals. Bikurim, okay, which is the firstborn fruit, this week's Parsha. Firstborn. First fruit. The Hamura Mina Toda, the part that they get from a Toda Korban, which is one of each of the sets of the four sets of loaves, plus they get, the zroa, not the zroa, what do you call it? The chazeh and the shok, the breast and the thigh, okay, which is what they get from all shlamim. So we're sort of Toda here includes shlamim, okay. So that's they could have listed it separately, but for whatever reason they want the 24 number, okay. So that's three. The El Nazir and the ram of a Nazir, which is also a type of a shlamim. So these are again why they call that, why they list that separately. Moment of Toda El Nazir, excuse me, thank you. Right, we're combining that Toda and El Nazir and all of Shlamim. Okay, so they get their portion of the Shlamim. We're counting that as one. The Oros Kadashim and the skin of the Korbanot, even of the Kachei Kachim, like if you get an Ola or something, so you can use the leather. Okay, but that you are not limited to using it in the Azara. Okay, so that is four. Interesting though. Go ahead and use it for shoes and then walk outside of Yerushalayim with it. Apparently. Okay, so that's the four. And now we got, what are the other 10? The Asara Bigvulin, and 10 that apply in all places. Hold on, I just want to check Rashi one thing. Yeah. No, I wanted to check Rashi because it's not true that you can't take the or outside of Yerushalayim, right? That'd be very bizarre. If you take a look at Rashi, 4 lines down in the wide lines, Rashi says like this, beginning of the lines, why do you count the skin of the kachim in the things that are in Yerushalayim? Does that mean you can't, if you make leather out of the skin of the ola, you can't go ahead and bring it out of Yerushalayim? He says no. To tell you that it's not included in things outside of the Beis Hamikdash means not that it can't be. Outside of Yerushalayim, not that it can't be brought outside of Yerushalayim, but to tell you the following: the Hani Oros lo misyayiv lehu ela b'Yerushalayim. They're given to them in Yerushalayim. But it's not counted as the things that are in the Beis Hamikdash. The only things that if you were to bring them out of the Beis Hamikdash, they would become invalid. So in a way, Rashi is saying here, when it says the skin is given in Yerushalayim, it's really capturing this weird middle status of the leather. On the one hand, you give it as part of a korban, so it's brought in the Beis Hamikdash. On the other hand, the Kohen can now use it and bring it anywhere. Okay, so you don't want to say that it's something that applies out in Gvulin because it only comes to the Kohen through a korban. But you don't want to call it something that's in the Mikdash because it's not limited to being used in the Beis HaMikdash. So saying Yerushalayim is a way of capturing the idea that it's given as a korban in Yerushalayim, part of a korban in the Beis HaMikdash, but it's not limited to the Beis HaMikdash. And in principle, yes, you can wear your leather shoes outside of Yerushalayim. Yes, John.
Whereas we'll get the Truma and Chal and things like that, and those can be given to any Kohen anyway.
Exactly. Okay, so those are the 4 that are Yerushalayim. The Asar B'Gvulin, and 10 that apply in the in all places, or all places in Eretz Yisrael. Truma, right, the first of the grain. The Trumas Ma'aser, the 10th of the 10th that the Levi gets. The Chala, the separating of the Chala. The Reishis Hagez, the first of the shearings. V'hamatanot, and the what's called the gifts, which is what referred to the Zroa, the Chaya, and the Keva, the parts of the animal that are given to a Kohen when you shecht an animal. Pidyon Haben, the money given for Pidyon Haben. Pidyon Petach Hamor, and the sheep given when you redeem a donkey. B'stei Achuzah, and the field of inheritance, right? If somebody sanctifies his field of inheritance and he doesn't redeem it or whatever, somebody buys it, it goes to the Kohanim. We mentioned that the other day. V'stei Charamim, similarly, if somebody is machrim, another way of sanctifying his field. The Gezel Hager, and money from the Ger that goes to the Kohanim. Okay? Now, so very good. These are listed in the things. Now, it is interesting that Gezel Hager is mentioned as something big Vulin. Because you remember before, the Gemara says you couldn't give it balayla and you couldn't give it lechatzaim, right? And all these things that make it like a korban. Now, it didn't explicitly say you couldn't give it. It didn't say you couldn't give it outside of the Beis Hamikdash, but it consistently talks about giving it to the mishmar of kohanim, right? We had a little discussion of could you give it to the mishmar that's coming up when it's not that mishmar now. Where does the act of giving it have to take place? The fact that it says here gvulin is strange. If you look at Tosfos,
doesn't mean
You
stole
became
from
chayav outside. Right. But like, I don't know, a lot of korbanot, you did your sin outside.
Oh, then you may think, if I stole from here, losing Yerushalayim,
I understand, but why? But I'm saying you did a sin outside of Yerushalayim, and you have the korban is still. Look at Tosfos. Gezel Ager. Tosfos says Tema. Amay choshiv Gezel Ager me'aser bigvulin. T'chiach damar Rabbi hichziru b'laylo chatzoyim lo yotza. The Hashem kayer chmana. Hachanam hichziru bigvulin lo yotza. Tidin Hashem. Right? He says, where do you give the Gezel Hager? Right? Can you give it out? If you give it outside the Beis Hamikdash, outside of Yerushalayim, then why can't you give it at night? To what degree is the act of giving the Gezel Hager like the act of bringing a korban? Right? So it's a really good question why it's counted in Yerushalayim. Rashi says, look at Rashi, 4 lines from the bottom end of the line. The Gezel Hager, Nami Karli Matanas Kvulin, she nosnu lekohen hamishmar chutz Yerushalayim yatsa. Tosfos says, yeah, you could give it. Okay, but Rashi says you have to give it to the Kohen of the Mishmar that's working. Okay, the El Ashmo Yala Yerushalayim lahakriv. So according to Rashi, he's trying to deal with this problem. But he says, okay, well, if you're Kohen and your Mishmar is working this week, and you happen to have stayed home for whatever reason, okay, I can give it to you outside of Yerushalayim, but it still counts as a korban because it's your group of Kohanim that are working this week. Then you'd have to inform them and split it with them, I guess. Very strange that we're treating the money to be korban-like and in all these ways, and we haven't really clarified where that act of giving has to take place. 1 minute, let's just finish what the Gemara is doing with this, and then I'll take your question. So anyway, we're back to our question. When they are receiving it, are they receiving it as a gift, or are they receiving it as if they are the heirs of the ger? And the nafkamina was meiser behem. So the Gemara says, it calls it a gift, like everything else is a gift, like it came to you new, not like it's some continuation of somebody else's ownership. You see, like all other things, they are, as they say, are receiving gifts, which makes sense because since again, as we said, if the guy is dead, you don't owe the money to the Ghana, whatever the Gazan is dead. The kids don't have to give the money to the Kohanim. They fundamentally don't have monetary rights. They fundamentally, its only obligation is that as an asham, that is a type of a korban, that is for kapara. So therefore, when they're receiving it, they're not receiving it as heirs of the ger. They're receiving it just as they would receive anything that would be given to the kohanim. Yes,
everyone would agree that if people are alive, whether I stole from not ger or ger, that you don't have to worry about any of this Yerushalayim stuff, right? It's only this one case.
Right. This is the only one the kohanim are taking the place of the ger. That's what I said at the beginning. That otherwise, giving that the money is a prerequisite to bringing the asham, but it itself is not considered like a korban, a kapara, and so on. It's a prerequisite. This act that it has a korban-like status, you're giving to the kohanim is only by gezel hager. Yes, Charlie.
Some of that list applies only within it. This last list of 10 apply only within it. It says from some of them apply everywhere.
That is correct. Gvulin sometimes sort of not specific in terms of that. Yes.
I think it's something sort of basic I need clarified. Like, let's say I give you 5 sheep on your 50th birthday. Gift.
Yeah.
So then it becomes part of your general flock.
I don't take meiser behema from it. Meiser behema is only the animals that are born to my flock. They're not just any, and that's why it's any of every 10 new animals that are born to my flock each year. So if I buy them, they're not animals that were born to my flock.
So that's really interesting. So then another way of conceptualizing Yerusha is in a way it's born into my flock.
What?
Another way.
Sorry.
Another way.
Everybody's foe. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Another way of conceptualizing a Yerusha is that it's born into my flock.
Right. Yerusha is a continuation of the previous ownership. So if no, let me be clear. If somebody's father had 100 sheep and he was Yoish Lamb, he does not give 10 meiser behemoths. If somebody's father had 10 sheep born to him that year, and then the father dies, and then the person inherits it, then he gives.
Only if you knew he didn't take it.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I was trying to clarify before. Yeah.
Things that a person gets in Yerusha are not like they were born to his flock. If somebody gets something in Yerusha, he takes the place of the person who died.
Whatever that person's was
obligation was, that would be his obligation.
If I don't know, I don't have to do it.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, let's go on. Well, yeah. All right, let's continue. All right, so we say like this. Now, I just want to see something. Right. Okay, so now continuing. Nosan is a kesef l'anshei mishmar. So moving on in the Mishnah, the money was given to the people of the Mishmar, and then it says, and then the guy died, the Goslin died. Okay, so remember, if the Gazan died before anything was given over, the Yoshim keep the money because the money is like part of the kapara. And if he's dead, you no longer do kapara for him after he's dead. Let's say he gave, and we just saw the whole thing established that it was like a matana. The Kohanim don't have any monetary rights to that money. So they gave the money though, and then the guy died. So the Mishnah says the Yoshim can't say, well, look, he's not getting his kapara anyway. Give us back the rest of his money. Give us back his money. They're not allowed to say that. So what can we infer from this? Why, right? So, I mean, why is that true? He didn't get to finish his kapara. So Amar Abai says, Shmamina kesef mechaper mechza. You see from the Mishnah that the money achieves a partial sense of atonement, right? The lo mechaper, if it did nothing by itself, if it only achieved atonement together with the asham, so the lo mechaper have amina mahadu liyorshim. So then the yorshim would have a right to say, give it back. Our father's dead. The money was there as a kapara. He's not going to achieve the kapara. Give it back to us. Okay? So, my time, they did not give it with that in mind. Ella, what the heck is going on today? Okay. They didn't give it to him with the understanding. It wasn't just stama matani. Here's a gift. No. They gave it with the understanding that it should achieve atonement. It should function as kapara. So if it didn't in the end function as kapara, they should have a right to demand it back. So therefore, the fact that they can't demand it back shows that we say that it did achieve some partial kapara. That's Abai's argument. Okay, but now the Gemara is going to challenge the assumption of his argument. You, Abai, are assuming that if somebody gives something without explicitly stipulating the conditions under which it's given, that they can basically negate the gift or the sale based on, well, I never intended that. Okay, so this is a really important question. This is a question about how much an unarticulated assumption can be used to, negate, to void a transaction. Okay, big nafkamin is about this for like aguna questions. Okay, in this condition, I never would have agreed, etc. Okay, so let's take a look. Elameata says Gemara. Okay, we understand where you're coming from, Abai, that for you it's important to say that it was a partial kapara, they would have a right. But let's challenge that question. Can you really say, hey, I didn't expect this, give it back to me? Elameata, if that's true, let's say I sanctify an animal, you sanctifies an animal as a chatas, and then he dies. So what's the halacha? The chatas has to be let to die because the owner has died. So why don't you say, oh no, he never sanctified it, assuming he would die. So tepuk l'chulin, let it become desanctified. He never separated off as a korban, thinking he would die. If that thing had happened in the future that he hadn't anticipated, now, if we're going to let the future thing say, oh, had I been thinking of that future event, if I would have known it would have happened, I wouldn't have done it. So if that's true, let it not be a chatos. So the Gemara says, no. It's in theory, you're right, but chatas shemesu ba'aleh hilchos gemirila. That's a halacha Moshe Sinai. Dilamisa azla that it dies. So in theory, it's a good argument. It really probably shouldn't be kadosh, but that's the halacha there. Elamiata. Okay, let's go on again. If you're going to say that had something happened in the future, I never would have done this, and we should use that to redefine what I did. Asham shemesu ba'alev leifik l'chulim. How about an asham? There, the halacha is that if the owners die, you wait to redeem it, and you transfer the money onto an ola. Why not there? Let's say that it's not sanctified. He never would have redeemed it, assuming he was going to die. He never would have sanctified it, assuming he was dying. The daita da'achilo afresha. He didn't separate it, thinking he was going to die, or had he known he was going to die, he wouldn't have separated it. So the Gemara says, no, Asham Nami Hilchos Gemirila. No, it's also a halacha, a tradition. Okay, Shobu Chosh B'chatas Meita, anything that had been a chatas, you'd let die. Asham Roeh, by an Asham grazes until it gets a blemish. So in principle, you're right, they shouldn't be kadosh, but that's the halacha. Ela Me'ata, okay, let's deal with another case where you can't say it's a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Yevama, Shenaflu Lifnei Mukashchim. A woman's husband dies. And the brother turns out to be a degenerate. Actually, here it didn't say degenerate. Here it says the woman's brother turns out to be somebody afflicted with pus, whatever. Boils and pus and whatever. A disgusting, repulsive person. So, kepa below chalitza. She should be able to, to just not walk away. She wouldn't even require chalitza, especially if it's hard to get chalitza. She never would have agreed to marry her husband had she known that had she known that the husband would die and that the brother would turn out to be this disgusting guy. So had she been able to anticipate all this future, which was completely unforeseeable at the time, okay, she never would have done it. So if you can say that we can use that to retroactively redefine her
I'm
das.
sorry, and if she didn't, I mean, what does that mean? Like, let's say she did know, then that would be okay. I mean,
Okay, maybe.
Anyway.
Okay, maybe, but she didn't know the
She
husband
knows
would
husband.
die and who would die first. So had we say that we can, if you had looked into the future, you would have seen this. You never would have done it now. If that's a good basis, so then she should not be now considered married to her husband and not require yibum. You understand why this could be very relevant for discussions of aguna? Okay. Had I known that my husband would have withheld the get, I never would have, agreed to marry him in the first place. Okay. So the Gemara says, Hasam anan sadi naminach naichla b'choldu. No, there we know that even had she been able to anticipate that, she still would have wanted to have been married to her husband now for the time being, even knowing what was coming up in the future. Okay, or what might come up in the future, as Rashi says. Right? To Reish Lakish, like Reish Lakish says, the Amar Reish Lakish, Tavumate of time do it is better to sit two together, Milamate of Armalu, than to sit as a widow or to sit alone. So this is the Gemara's assumption, right, that women are willing, to agree to be married under, it's much higher threshold need to assume that a woman wouldn't have wanted to be married, which, as you can imagine, creates a lot of challenges again in this sort of aguna sphere. But here the Gemara says that at least without these exceptions, the Gemara seems to say, in principle, you could say, had I been able to anticipate this would have happened in the future, I never would have bought it. So the question is, really? What's the extent of that? Why don't I say from Michael, I bought Michael's nice iPhone. I'm always buying the iPhone. And then it slips out of my hand and it breaks or whatever. And I say, had I known that would have happened, I never would have bought it. Now, maybe that it was my fault. Okay, but let's say I buy a car from Michael.
Well, you buy the Samsung.
I buy a Samsung, right? And then it blows up and it turns out it was a defect. That wasn't his fault. It wasn't my fault. Had I known about it? Or I buy a car from Michael. I get it checked out. Michael didn't deceive me or anything like that. But then, even if you get it checked out, sometimes a month later, the carburetor blows. Oh, I know that. I never would have bought it. So no sale is ever final. So it's crazy. So Tosha says that's why all these cases, Tosha says, are primarily unilateral. Now, Korban is clearly unilateral. There's not another side that has to be can, because normally we say dvarim shebelev and dvarim. If it's not an articulated condition, it doesn't matter what they are. So the Kachin cases are clearly unilateral. How about the Kiddushin case? So this is the Kiddushin case is unilateral in the sense that the husband's already dead. So to sort of say in this condition, I never would have married my husband, he's no longer as a side in the conversation because he's dead. You're only getting out of the marriage to the husband in order to free you from the brother-in-law. Right? So in that type of a case, the ability to claim I never would have agreed under these circumstances when you're not really hurting or impacting the other side of the transaction, there is no other side in this case because the husband is dead, there you might have more latitude. Okay, and in the case of the Kohanim, presumably the giving of the gift, if you're just a passive receiver of a gift, that is seen, and you're not exchanging it for anything, that's seen as more unilateral. So this raises the idea that dvarim shebelev einam dvarim, what you're thinking isn't relevant to what you theoretically would have been thinking. Here you're not even thinking it. It's only, had I been able to think about the possibility, what I would have thought now anyway. So it says we're only considering that here in some things that are more unilateral, which again means it has much less use in thinking about Kiddushin cases. The final thing I want to say about this, this is a huge ideas, etc., in these three lines, but the final thing I want to say about this is that I don't understand the Gemara's comparison to a bias case at all. All these cases, you had fundamentally a transaction, and then you had some external consideration, sanctifying something as a chatas. Oh, had he known, he would have died. Marrying this guy, had he known, the husband would have died. Da, da, da. But the fundamental act was an act of kedusha, of being makdish something, or of kiddushin. The fundamental act was exactly what it was defined to be. Right? In this case, okay, when the guy gives this thing as a kapara, he's not giving it as a gift. He's giving it as a korban. He's giving it as a kapara. Okay? So it wasn't a gift. So why does the Kohanim say we have rights to it? You don't have rights to it. It was given to you as a kapara. And it no longer is function. It didn't, and assuming that it doesn't function until the asham is brought, right? That's Abayi's argument. And the asham is not being brought because the guy is dead. Then it stops being what it was given to you as. It's not some external reason to negate it, right? It was only given in the context of a kapara, and it never in the end. It's like, I don't know, I gave a down payment, okay, and then in the end I didn't go through with the transaction. I get my down payment back. It's like, oh, well, that's trying to use your das had you known. No, it was given in the context of a down payment. So if the transaction didn't complete, why don't I get it back? I don't really understand the parallel the Gemara is making from Abaye's case to these cases. What did you want to say, Jenna?
I mean, I guess it just depends how connected it is with the asham, right? But like, is it that it's the first step in that, or is it a separate thing that you're giving?
Well, that's what Abai says. Abai says, I'm going to prove that it does something by itself. Because if it didn't do something by itself, you'd be entitled to get it back. And the Gemara says, why would you be entitled to get it back? That's just some das that you have unarticulated.
That no one ever argues with Abai.
No, the Gemara is arguing. The Gemara is saying that we don't buy your argument. It's meaning the Gemara's pushback is saying, even if it doesn't do something by itself, it's not so clear that your das, unarticulated das, should allow you to reclaim it. Right? That was the Gemara's challenge of Abaye. And my point is, this is not just some unarticulated das. This is the whole context in which it's being given. What you basically said back to me was exactly Abaye's point. But the Gemara is pushing back against Abaye. The Gemara says, maybe not. Maybe they're entitled to it even if it didn't achieve anything because it was, just they gave him a gift. They can't ask for it back. Or he can't ask for it back. Why not? It wasn't given as a gift. It was given as a kapara. So I don't exactly get the Gemara's pushback. But anyway, very important Gemara in terms of this question about to what degree might future issues, and you could say a daita dahachi lo, in that condition I never would have, and so on.
Does that logic follow all of the Darim?
I mean, there is an issue about that, but the Darim is, much more sort of unilateral.
That concept seems to have been centrally located. Right?
One place that this comes up, by the way, is a case where you can't say like tavlamit of tantum, is that a guy turns out to be abusive, and that becomes clear right after, very soon after the marriage. Okay, so if it, anyway, there are times where you could sort of say, had I known, so and so on, I never would have, right? But anyway, there could also be a case where something is being hidden at the time of the transaction itself. All right, anyway, let's continue. Okay, Nosen is a kesef li Yehoyarav. So now the Mishnah goes on and says, if the Mishnah was given, Yehoyarav is the first Mishmar, and then the Asham was given to the Mishmar that follows, that's fine. The kesef has to be given first. If the order was reversed, you were not Yotze the Asham if it was offered before the money was given. So Tana Rabbanan, Nosen Asham li Yehoyarav, the kesef li Yadaya. So that's the case that the Asham was given first, and then the money was given to the next Mishmar. Yachzir kesef etzel Asham. So the money goes back to the Asham. Now, of course, that means, that's funny. The money was given to the following Mishmar, but obviously the scenario must be, it's still the first Mishmar's week. You gave it in advance, because how are you going to get the money back if it's already the next week? That somebody, I'm remembering that the New York Times many years ago ran an article about how bad the signage is in New York. And somebody wrote a letter and said that the best or the worst example that they remember is that they were once driving down the highway and they saw a sign that said, exit out, use exit 3 miles back. So anyway, so if it's already the next week, you can't give the money back to the previous week, right? They've left. All right. Anyway, so presumably you gave the money in advance to the next Mishmar, and then it says no. Then give it back to the current Mishmar because the money has to come first. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. The Chachamim say Yachzir Asham Nitzel Kesef. No, the Asham goes to the next Mishmar. Okay, so presumably the Mechashem has not been slaughtered yet. Obviously, then it would be puzzle. Hey Chidami, what's the case? You gave the Asham to Mishmar number 1 when it was its week. The Mishmarto the Yehoyarav, the Kesef Liyadaya, the Mishmarto the Yadaya, and you gave the money to Mishmar number 2 in its week. Yadaya, Zezach B'Shalo. It's too late. Each one gets its own, which doesn't mean that the Asham was good, but it basically means that you understand the Chachamim saying that if they haven't been makriv yet the Asham, they left their week without being makriv the Asham. Let them give the Asham to number 2. But you don't understand how Rabbi Yehuda would say if number week is over, give the money back to guys number 1. They're already out of here. What sense does that make? So Amar Rav said, where you're talking about the Yoav Asham li Yehoyarav Mishmarta the Yehoyarav. It's week number 1. You gave the Asham to group number 1. The Kesef li Yadaya Mishmarta the Yehoyarav, and you gave the money to Yadaya a week in advance. Okay, while it was still week number 1. Rabbi Yehuda Savra. Now, so what do you do now? So you have to have the money first, but the money was already given to group number 2. Rabbi Yehuda Savar, even the lav nishmers to Yadayahi, since it was not group number 2's week, the Yadaya consumer. Yadaya is the one that has to make the sacrifice, excuse the pun, that has to give up what they've got. They have to give their money back to group number 1. Give the money to group number 1. Group number 1 will take the money, and then they'll be able to bring the asham. For Rabbanan Savi and the rabbis hold, no, group number 1 did the wrong thing. Because why? The kilo asham mikmi even though it was their week, they're not supposed to agree to accept the sacrifice before they've been given the money. Hilkach, therefore, because they did the wrong thing by accepting a sacrifice without the money coming first. Hilkach we find them. Where they're told, don't bring the korban, give it to group number 2, and let group number 2 bring it next week. Okay, Tanya, we're talking Brisa. I'm a Rabbi. Rabbi said, the Diva Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, that says the group number 2 has to give the money back to group number 1 if it's still group number 1's week. In Kidmu b'nei Yehoyara v'ikrivu asa asham, if group number 1 jumped ahead and brought the asham, yachzev yavi asham acher, then the guys will bring another asham because it was an asham brought before the money was given. V'akrivu b'nei Yodaya, and group number 2 will bring the asham because the money was given to group number 2.
Who pays for that second animal?
Yeah, well, that's a good point. Presumably the owner. I mean, that gets to a whole general question.
What owner?
The Goslin.
The Goslin.
Yeah, the Goslin gets to a whole general problem that when Kohani make mistakes, it's the owners who pay. Okay, but anyway, that's a whole separate question.
We've seen that before.
Yeah. Okay, and they, group number 1, so the korban was no good, so the korban is now going to be brought by group number 2, but group number 1 at least gets to keep the asham that they already brought. So what does that mean? The Gemara says, Amri lemai chazi asham pazulu. What do you mean group number 1 keeps the asham? It's invalid. So it was brought before the money. Amarava le'oro. Okay, they can't eat the meat, but they can eat they can use the skin, they can use the leather. All right, so presumably that sounds like a korban puzzle. You can still use the leather. And Tosos challenges that because elsewhere it seems like you can't use the leather of a korban puzzle. And Tosos really leaves it as a question. I would suggest, it's a funny type of a psul here. A normal psul is the blood was spilled, the animal had a blemish, it was pigul. Okay, there's an intrinsic problem in the animal itself. Here the animal is 100% kosher. It's just that it didn't achieve kapara because it preceded the money. Okay, so that type of a psul, that is a type of a psul that's chutz legufo, intrinsically it's a kosher korban, but it did not achieve kapara for the owners, right? There, you know what it would be like? It would be like, let's say somebody was shochet a korban shelo lishmo. Okay, if you bring a korban shelo lishmo, the korban is kosher, but the bayalim don't get kapara. Okay, so there, you could go ahead and benefit with the leather. The point is, it's not totally like that, because if I shech the korban shelo lishmo, I still get to eat the meat. Okay, here it seems to say you don't get to eat the meat. The only thing they get is the leather. So it's this weird type of a middle status where it's not an intrinsic psul, so they still get to eat the leather, but it's not a completely sort of external problem, and they can't eat the meat of the korban. So it's a strange issue that Tosos asks about. Yes.
Is there a religious idea behind the fact that the kapara is dependent upon the giving of the money first? Like you have to be.
Yeah, we mentioned that. It's like the classic, exactly. It's like the classic thing that we say in Mesechos Yoma. Okay. You can't ask forgiveness from God before you are meratzes chavero.
So it's like embedded in this whole.
I know it's funny that the Gemara never said that explicitly, but right, don't start bringing your korban to God until you've made restitution. Yeah. Right. Okay, so the Gemara says like this. Okay. Tanya, we're talking another brisa. I'm a Rebbe. L'div Rebbe Yehuda, according to Rebbe Yehuda, that says the money goes back to group number 1. In kiyim asham yachzir asham hito kesef. If the asham is around, then it follows the money. Follow the money. So the Gemara says, 1 minute. That's the rabbis. That's the rabbanon. That's not Rebbe Yehuda. Rebbe Yehuda yachzir ketzel etzel asham yisay. Rebbe Yehuda is the one that says the money goes to where the asham is. So the Gemara says, no. Here's the case. Kigon nothing nishmarted Yehoyarav. Group number 1 had the asham, group number 2 had the money, and group number 1 never brought the asham, and their week is over. Okay, so they still have this little animal with them. What are they going to do with it? Below tovu, and they never said to group number 2, "Give us the money. We demand. We have rights to the money." So this is teaching us that they essentially are mochel their rights to the money, and in that case, their week is over. They never ask for the money from group number 2. They give the animal the asham over to group number 2 for them to be makriv. Now, and I have a couple of questions about this. Number one, even if they did demand the money, okay, if group number 2 never handed it over, okay, then what are you supposed to do then? Wait a year till it's group number 1's turn again to bring it? Like, the korban will probably be possible anyway, because korbanos have an expiration. I mean, in the sense that the animals can't be, have to be a certain age. So I like, well, actually, it's not true though, because it's a half, it's 24 mishmarot, so you only have to wait a half year. But even so, the animal still might be too old. So, like, I don't get it. Even if they did demand it, I'm not sure what options you have. But the other question I've got is a general issue, which is if it was my week to bring a korban and we didn't bring this animal, like, it was a big backup. We had 20 animals that were given to us, or 2,000 animals. Some we didn't bring. Presumably, the normal standard operating procedure is you hand it over to the next mishmar and they bring it, during their week. Right? So this is just like, so wouldn't this be the normal thing? We had an asham to bring. We didn't have a chance to bring it. You give it over to the next group, So it is funny that it uses this phrase of like they were mochel their rights to the money. Like, it's just they didn't bring the korban during their week. So I don't know. Yes.
So
maybe it means that maybe the Havamina is, here could be the Havamina. The Havamina is that group number 2 should give the money to group number 1, and then group number 2 would bring the korban.
Yes.
That would be if group number 1 had the rights to the money, then maybe they could keep their rights to the money even as group number 2 is going to bring the korban.
Right. Yeah. So I just never thought of this before. You got hundreds of animals. Like, excuse me, to me they all look alike.
Right.
That's some system of markers. Like, this one's birthday is next week. It's going to be too. Like,
that's a good question.
How do they do that?
I don't know. I thought you were going to say a system of markers so they knew which is a chatas, which is an old one.
That too. In other words, all these things. Right?
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
They all look alike.
They have to, they got to get one of those like scanners in there and they tag them.
They all have barcodes on the front.
That would make it much better. All right. Good. Very good. Moving on. Okay.
Yeah, random because that'd be a move.
All right. Moving on. Okay. Okay. Tiny Brisa. I'm a Rebbe. L'dim Rebbe Yehuda, according to Rebbe Yehuda, who says the money goes to the Asham. In Kiyam Asham, Yachir Ketzev Eitzel Asham. If the Asham is still around, the money goes after the Asham. Pshita, of course. That's exactly Rebbe Yehuda's position. What are you telling us? No. We're talking about that group number 1 and group number 2's weeks are over, and nobody brought the korban. Okay. The low tavu, and nobody demanded their rights from the other one. Group number 1 never said, give us the money. And when group number 2 was their week, they never said to group number 1, give us the asham. So in that case, that everybody was sort of mochel to everybody else, which basically means, I guess what it would mean would be group number 2 would keep their money. And then when it swung around again for group number 1, they would bring the asham, and then the asham would be coming after the money. Understand? Because the asham was given to group number 1, but it wasn't brought as a korban. The money was given to group number 2. So then, assuming that everybody is mochel, everybody, you keep yours, we keep ours. Then when it swings around 24 weeks from now, group number 1 is makriv it. The asham is being brought as a korban, being offered on the mizbeach after the money was being given. Again, I don't understand why you're entitled to do that. I would think you would just have to give the korban to the next week and let them bring it. But anyway, Kamash Malan, this teaches us that we don't say that. Since no side made demands of the other side, it goes back to the normal halacha, which is that the money follows the korban. So group number 2 gives the money to group number 1, and I guess they wait 24 weeks to bring it. Again, I don't know, because there's a 24-week cycle of the mishmarot. So I don't get it. You're allowed to hold on to an animal that was given to your mishmar to wait to bring it, or is it just that group number 2 gives the money to group number 1 and the korban is brought by group number 3? I don't know. Very strange.
Can you even take a kadshe column outside once it's
before it's shechted?
They bring all their. You thinking they're bringing all the animals with them when they go back home?
No, that would make no sense. Yeah, exactly. But I the whole idea that you can wait and I don't get it exactly. Oh, that's true. You could wait till the regel, and then bring it then maybe. I don't know. Very strange.
When they switch mishmarot, the mishmar is walking to Jerusalem from wherever they live.
Right.
The ma'amadot are following them.
No, the Mama
Or they
Dod
stand
are
there
stay.
at
The
the
Mama
edge of
Dod
Jerusalem?
stay. No, there are Jews that are the Israel that stay in the base of Mikdash to represent the Jewish community. But the Mama Dod are in the individual cities. Not the Kohanim did not come from all over the country. Many sort of stayed in where they were. Right. I mean, you would have too many people working in the base of Mikdash. Okay, but they sort of but anyway, but they had their whole mishmar system in the cities as well. We're not going to deal with that. Okay, you know what I mean? So maybe if you bring the gezel, you have to bring the money before the asham and not the reverse. What do you know this? Hasham mushav la Hashem la kohen. The asham, which here he says means the money that is returned to God, goes to the kohen. Milvad, in addition to el hakipurim asher chaper bo alav, the ram of atonement that he will be atoned for. So Michlal, the Kesef Reish, you see, first it's the money, and then it mentions the ram of atonement, the asham. Amar Humir Rabbanan l'Rava. So one of the rabbis said to Rava, El miata milvado lasa boker shelo lasa tamid. Right, it says by the musaf that you bring the musaf in addition to the morning ola. So does that mean that the musaf comes first and then the morning ola? Hachanami Michlal the musaf b'reisha. So should you read because it says in addition to, that means the thing mentioned afterwards comes second? How do you know nothing comes before the morning sacrifice? You bring on it, the ola, on the morning sacrifice. The morning sacrifice is the thing that starts the day. So just because it says milvad doesn't mean that thing comes next. So Amarava, Vamarava, Ha'ola Ola Rishona, Ha'ola means the first Ola, the Ola of Tamid, that is always the first thing. So Amalei, he said back to him, I'm not just saying because it says milvad. Milvad doesn't mean the thing said next comes second. I'm talking about the future tense. Milvad el kippur yechaper. In addition to the sacrifice which he will be atoned by. So the sacrifice has yet to be brought. Okay, so therefore it means you first give the money in addition to the sacrifice which will be brought to achieve atonement. So that means the sacrifice comes after the money. All right. Nothing knows that Karen. So then it says, okay, the chomish is not ma'akev. Tana Rabbanan. So here's a parallel case that if a person misappropriates hektish, they have to return the value and they have to bring a fifth, and they have to bring a korban, just like this case. Okay, and it's also an asham. So how do you know if somebody brings the me'ilah, meaning the principle, and he does not bring the asham, or the korban without the money, shelo yatsa, he did not fulfill the obligation, he doesn't get atonement. Talmud Lomar, the el ha'asham v'nislach lo, the ram of asham, and will be forgiven, and that's read as the el is the korban, and the asham here is read as the money. So only with the korban and the money it's forgiven. How do you know, though the money has to be first? Talmud Lomar, this is by Me'ilah, same as we said by Gezel Hager. The El Ha'asham, Ha'asham Bikvar, the ram of the Asham. What allows it to be the ram of the Asham is that, again, the Asham here means the money, is that the money preceded it. It's pretty funny. You could have said the order of the words means the money comes next, even reading the word Asham as the money. But no, what frames it as a korban for the atonement is that the atonement money preceded it.
It's the grammar of it, the smichut.
I understand. Maybe the fifth is ma'akev. Talmud Lomar be'el ha'asham v'nislach lo. El v'asham ma'akvim behekdesh ve'ein chomesh ma'akev. No, it's only the el and the asham that are required, that prevent you from being atoned, and not the fifth. V'yilamed hekdesh me'hedyot v'hedyot me'hekdesh. And we'll learn hekdesh from hedyot, meaning hekdesh is me'ilah, hedyot is gezel hager. It's both korbanot that you're bringing, but the sin was a sin against hekdesh as opposed to a sin against a commoner. And hedyot me'hekdesh. Hekdesh me'hedyot, what do we learn to me'ilah from the case of gezel hager? Ma'asham dahazam karen. How do we know the word asham in the pasuk by me'ilah meant the principle? Because it was clear by the gezel hager. By the gezel hager it says ha'asham milvad el ha'kipurim. It was clear that the word asham didn't mean the korban, because it says you return the asham in addition to the ram. Okay, so it's very clear in the Gezel Hager that the word asham did not mean korban. The word asham meant the principle. So the same way we see there that asham meant principle, af asham dahachakar. Even by me'ilah it's less clear, but we're going to assert that the word asham by me'ilah means principle. the Hedyom Nehektish, and then we learn the Gezel Ager from the Be'ila case. Ma'hektish in Chomish Ma'akev, the same way we learned the El Hasham V'nislach Lo, that the Chomish is not necessary. I mean, that doesn't prevent one from being atoned. So Af Hedyom Nami in Chomish Ma'akev, the same by Gezel Ager, although there's an obligation of Chomish, it does not present atonement. So now we are done with that, and we have 5 minutes to begin the next paragraph.
So they're saying the last line means essentially a knas is not ma'akev your kapara.
Knas is not ma'akev your kapara. Correct. I mean, in this case.
In this case.
Okay. Last parak returns us to classic Baba Kamma issues. I mean, yes, here was about stealing, but then it was a lot about this special case of swearing and the special korban and the asham, etc. This sort of evokes more similar to the beginning of the 9th parak. Remember, the beginning of the 9th parak focused on shinoi, right? In a way, the 7th parak introduced all these ideas, shinoi, shinoi rishus, shinoi mas, etc. And the beginning of the 9th parak was a heavy emphasis on shinoi mas, physically changing of the object. This parak is going to focus us a little bit more on the shinoi rishus aspects, the changing of possession, and again, under what circumstances a Gazlan pays or not, or gives back the object or not. Let's take a look. Get started. Hagozel uma'achil panav. Somebody steals, we're back to Gzela, okay, and he feeds his kids. That's why he stole. Nebuch, he couldn't put food on the table. He went to the supermarket, he stole the food, he fed it to his kids. And now we're going to read this. Or they didn't eat it, and he stole, and the money was left over after he died. They don't have to reimburse. Now that's a big shocker. If the principal is still physically around, the object that was stolen, why is it that they would not have to give it back to the original owner? Okay, it's one thing if it no longer exists. Okay, but we'll see about the new Gemara. If it is something that has liens on it, they have to pay. What? It sounds like if he stole something that has liens on it. Well, the only thing that has liens on it is like land. How do you steal land? Maybe slaves. So I don't get it. Like, it's a very strange Mishnah. Why do you not have to pay back if it's around? And why do you have to pay back if the thing has liens on it? So we're going to see there's going to be 2 very different reads of this Mishnah. Let's take a look at the Kamma. Amar Rav Chisda. If somebody stole something and the owners have not given up hope, and then I stole something from Joe here, and then Charlie came, and I stole Joe's apple, and then Charlie came and he ate it. So Ratzamizegova. Joe can collect from me, I'm a Goslin, and he can collect from Charlie. Charlie's also a Goslin or a Mazik. Now, the first thing I would want to know would be whether Charlie knew that it was stolen or not. Right? I mean, can he be sued as a guy, even though it is true that he just ate something that wasn't his, he took something from Joe, but if he had rights to assume it was mine, he's like, in a case where he ate it with my permission and he honestly believed it was mine, it's, one would imagine that one would think he should be potter. Okay? That's not being explicated with Rav Chisda. Okay? So let's assume that Charlie was aware that it was stolen. Make it easier. So now Joe can collect either from me or from Charlie. Okay, I'm a Goslin and Charlie's a Goslin. Okay, Ratzamizegova. My timer, as long as Joe hasn't given the hope of getting it back, he's like that, Joe, I'm weaving you into this narrative. Because it's still under his control. So when Charlie ate it, he was also stealing from Joe. Okay, it's not. Now, somebody steals and he feeds his kids and then he dies, the kids are exempt. Why are the kids exempt? They ate the food that belonged to this other guy. Okay, so Tiyuf to the Rav Chisda. This is a contradiction to Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda will say back to you, Kik Tanya hi lachar yeush. No, the Mishnah is talking about lachar yeush. Now, why does lachar yeush matter? So you could say it's an idea of a shina rishus. Reuven steals and he gives it to his kids and they eat it. So that's a yeush, and now the kids are separate rishus. It's like it changed hands, and now the kids own it, and therefore that's why it's different. Okay, this is going to be the question that we're going to get into a minute, whether Rishus Yoresh is Rishus Lokech. When somebody gives it to his kids, okay, he either bequeaths it to his kids, he dies, or he actually gives it to his kids, while he's alive. He puts it on the table. Are they seen as a separate domain? Do they take possession? Would you say Yesh and Shinu Rishus if somebody gave it to his kids? So Tosfos says, we're going to get to that in a minute, but I just want to lay out that Tosfos says within this read of the Mishnah, you don't have to assert that. All you have to assert is that once Joe's control of the object has weakened, because it's after Yeish, right? You remember from all the stuff we've learned earlier. Already once it's stolen from him, his control over it is weakened. He can't sell it. The Goslin can't sell it. Neither have full ownership or control. Now, not only is it not out of his physical control, he's given up hope of getting it back, okay, to the point that if a really third party would come and take it, they'd be able to keep it. So if a third party could take it and keep it, then even if the kids are not considered a third party, but Joe can't collect from them for being a mazik or for being a goslin, since the object is basically waiting for somebody to come and take it. I'll give you an example. Let's say you had a lost object on the street and you were miyash getting it back and I could pick it up and take it. But rather than picking up and take it, I stomped on it and I broke it. Can you collect from me? You're a mazik. At that moment, it was still mine. You hadn't taken possession of it. The answer would be, well, no. At that state where your ownership is so weakened, how can you collect from it? So what Rav Chizda is saying is that our Mishnah is after Yeish. After Yeish, the kids eat it. You can't collect from the kids. But that's also why, and so that's how he reads the Mishnah. How you read, we're going to now read the rest of the Mishnah. We'll have to wait for tomorrow. So Dov, I'm giving you a little bit of a challenge to take over. I'm not going to be here tomorrow, but it is going to be a little bit tricky. 2 different ways of reading this Mishnah. We will continue with this tomorrow.